This is the UNspecial podcast. I'm joined today with Dr. Christy Hafer. Dr. Hafer is a pediatric and neurological chiropractor. She is a mom and is the co-owner / founder of Purpose Driven Chiropractic in Eagle, Idaho. Super excited to have her on because I, ironically, have been coming across chiropractic work specializing in Dr. Hafer's specialties, such as the nervous system, which we're going to learn a lot about. So super excited. Going to have some fun. Thank you, Dr. Hafer, for being on.
Thanks, Zach. I'm super excited to be on too.
Yeah. So how long have you been a chiropractor?
Well, I've been a chiropractor for 17 years. We started in 2008, but a nervous system focused chiropractor was about 2015. So we're going on 10 years with that focus.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you face, let's get into that. There is a lot of doubt against chiropractors, right? There's a lot of misconceptions.
Yeah.
Is there even more now that you're specialized in nervous system?
I don't think as much. And what's interesting is, I know it's kind of wild because when I first started chiropractic, I was going to leave the profession, to be honest, because I was so bored with it. I just wasn't being fulfilled with taking care of neck pain, back pain, and great, to help somebody get out of pain, that they're probably living a better life, but it was pretty mundane for me. And I think that's where a lot of chiropractors start and stop, is muscles and joints. And it's not wrong. It's just very incomplete because the nervous system is what's controlling everything. And as soon as I learned that, everything changed for me. So chiropractic school was a good foundation for, general things, just like I mentioned. But it's not preparing you to take care of any neurological deficits, developmental issues, children, anybody with special needs, on the spectrum, ADHD, all the things that we see in our office, ill-equipped for that. I had no idea how to take care of that. And it wasn't until my son was having his struggles that I discovered nervous system focused care and just changed everything for us. So most people think neck pain, back pain, you're going to get your neck cracked. They see the YouTube videos and they're like, oh, I don't want to do that to my kid. But when you really are talking about the nervous system and they see the gentleness of it, we don't have a lot of those people that are trying, we're overcoming that obstacle anymore. They're like, yeah, nervous system, this has been a buzzword. We understand it. We get that it's living in the body, and, this body work, if you will, is going to help their nervous system. So it's been better for sure.
Yeah. Can you break down the nervous system?
Yeah.
Just take us like super basic.
Absolutely. Well, you would think, being a chiropractor, you had to learn about the nervous system, and we did. We had to study the nerves are coming out of the spine and all of this. But really, when you look at the nervous system, it is controlling and modulating everything inside of your body. So it is control of every single cell. It's in control of your healing, the state of your nervous system. So you've probably heard of like fight or flight, rest and digest, those two sides of the nervous system. The state of the nervous system is also going to determine the state of the body. So how you're reacting, how you're thinking. When you're in protection or fight or flight, you're not healing, you're not digesting your food, you're not sitting still and listening, you're not thinking through a process, you're impulsive, you're reactive, you're tense, probably not sleeping well. There's so much that nervous system controls. So when you talk about this one system in the body that controls everything else, we really look at it as the foundation. So how can we ensure that the nervous system's in this calm, safe state so that they can live their life, they can go through therapies that they need, they can listen to their parents if that's the problem, or sit still in school if that's the issue, or digest their food, or start talking. You and I were chatting about that before. All of a sudden language starts coming online. We look at that as the foundation because it's the master control center in the body.
Wow. So everything comes back to the nervous system. What are some common, what throws it off?
It's such a great question.
Everything, right?
I love that. Well, one thing I was going to say, I don't know how long you want me to talk for, but one thing I was going to say is the nervous system, the neurocord in the womb, that develops first before the heart even beats, because something has to tell the heart to beat. So that nervous system is developing in utero. One of the things that we find that can be a really common thing is the state of mom's nervous system. We're actually teaching the baby's learning in utero what the outside world is about. because they need to be able to survive. So if mom's in this constant state of fight or flight, we're teaching the baby. And one thing that just to even note with that is a baby is more sympathetic, which is the fight or flight side, like that side of your nervous system. So sympathetic, parasympathetic. Your sympathetic nervous system is what's developing in utero first, because that's what's keeping the baby alive. We're not going to get parasympathetic function starting to come online until about 32 weeks gestation. That's when you see the rapid development of baby. Baby grows really fast, organs and glands are developing, and you see that last 8-week push of the growth of the baby. It's just, we're just laying that foundation. So now if we have a mom who's super stressed out, whether it's, a job or maybe a relationship or something traumatic happened, we hear that quite a bit, loss of a home or a loved one. Now the nervous system's even more heightened into fight or flight, and that little developing uterus is learning what's going on. So now we've got a mom in fight or flight. Typically, I don't know how far you want to go with this, but now we usually don't have a mom that's relaxed for birth.
I'm locked in. Keep going.
Now, this mom that's under fight or flight, the way you go into birth first initially is you have to get into parasympathetic. You have to be calm before the birth is going to initiate. And a lot of the times we got to force that to happen because mom's not comfortable. Mom's in fight or flight. We've got to add an induction. We can plan this induction. Now mom's still not feeling safe. We've got to add an epidural so she's not feeling all this pain that she's going through. There's just a cascade of interventions that happen. Now mom's unable to, push the baby out of the birth canal, or at least feel her body, which should do the job. That's a whole nother story. There's a fetal ejection reflex to help release that baby. Now there's intervention that's needed. So we need forceps, maybe a vacuum, sometimes a cesarean section. And that's really going to freak a baby out. You pull out a baby by the head and neck and think that they're going to be fine, hand it back to the mom. And mom's wondering why they can't turn their head. Nurse latched, haven't stopped crying. They're stiff as a board. Well, we just had a cascade of interventions that have led to that. And it's not to beat up, the way that a child is born, but to be more aware of that, because there's very, very few instances, unless it's a midwife birth, that they're saying, hey, you should really get this child checked by a neurological chiropractor. There was some trauma that happened here. Instead, it's like, we have no idea why they can't nurse their latch. I have no idea what's happening here. Weird. You probably don't have good milk. They're blaming mom. Like your nipples are too big. I've heard like every single story about it. Like, stop having dairy. Don't have caffeine. And these moms are like, what's happening? And they don't even think to go back of like what happened during that birth process that potentially threw off the delicate fibers of that head and neck of that little one. That's the thing we're protecting. A baby comes out of the womb and we're like, oh, protect that. You don't let the neck flop around, but yet we just popped them out. Sometimes they needed to be there. Sometimes it was an emergency, but we're not putting that all together to be like, this could have really interfered. If we would have yanked the shoulder, it's not moving, but we don't think about the brainstem where nervous system information is coming to and from the brain. So now we'll have a disconnect.
Wow, that is wild. It all goes back to the mom. So then my first 3 kids were natural birth. And then our 4th was a C-section due to finding out, that's how we found out my wife had cancer. So he came out at 29 weeks. It just, we tried. Well, I was asking those questions, but it wasn't possible.
Yeah.
And so how early can they come in? Like he's turning 1 this month. Can he come in now?
Absolutely. Yeah, we see him right out of the womb. Our goal is to get the mom's nervous system calm, even preconception. That's our ultimate goal. That's like the gold standard of get mom out of fight or flight so that she can get pregnant, because somebody in fight or flight doesn't want to be reproducing either. Their body sometimes has to get forced into it. Get mom's nervous system calm, allow her to develop this baby and make this beautiful connection with this little one in utero, keep mom's nervous system calm so that we do have a better chance at ideal birth outcomes. And then check the baby. There's research that they've done to see how many infants have subluxation. The word we use is subluxation, which is nerve interference, subluxation patterns at birth. And they started that back in the 80s. It wasn't even chiropractors that were doing it. It was more the DOs, because they know how important that is as well. And they found vaginal births 80 to 90% of the babies do. Now in 2015, they did it again, research company, but found out in 2015 that 99% of them had at least one pattern, if not more, of subluxation from the birth process. We know these kids, even in a, like birthing pool, mom's chilling, she had the best nervous system ever, doesn't mean the baby didn't have a little interference that might be interfering just a little bit, but it's enough to hold them back neurologically to what their God-given potential was. So yeah, little ones that start like your youngest there, that's tough because it's coming out, before parasympathetic was developing even. And then now, being one, the brain's doing a ton of development and growth. Grows about 101% in their first year. So it's making all sorts of pathways. Yeah. Yeah. We're actually born with the raw material that we need to build out the brain. And we gotta build it out like a city. So we've got to lay the foundations. We've got to, put in the wiring and the sewer and the lights and the roads, and it's got to grow itself 101%. And then the next year, 50 more percent on top of that. So it's usually later on in life, not always, we can usually recognize there's some issues going on, but we'll see later on in life when they're 3, 4, 5 years old and they're supposed to be doing these other skills like maybe listening, following through with directions, talking, making friends, being a little bit more emotionally regulated, and they're unable to. When we were building out the city, we weren't ready for that. There were some errors at that point that were happening. So now I always joke because people here get it. We're in Idaho, and at COVID times, we got California dumped into here. I'm like,
Yeah.
This is like California dumping into Idaho. The infrastructure wasn't ready. So now there's a breakdown. Same kind of thing in the little one's brain that we might be like, I don't know what happened, but all of a sudden they turned 3 years old and they couldn't do these things. And you're like, well, like we set it up back here. So let's take a look at how the pregnancy was. Let's take a look at how the birth went down. Let's take a look at what happened after the birth. Like, how was the mom being supported emotionally? A lot of times they're like, good luck with that baby, and, latching, and they're kind of left to their own devices, doing all the research and blaming themselves for, anything that's going wrong with the kid. Like I said, with the breast milk or, nipple size or something. And we're going to be able to see patterns of stress that have stacked up against that little one. And we're going to measure it. So, long story short, they can come in right out of the womb. We have neurological scans that we run that are non-invasive to get a picture of, what did that birth process do to their nervous system and how's the nervous system reacting? Because it's always going to try to heal. It's always going to try to be efficient. We look for patterns or compensations in the nervous system. So it's like almost like these roadways that are making a workaround instead of straight shot to the brain. Because that brain in that first year is really just a receptor. It's taking in all this information. Baby doesn't do a whole lot first year. Theoretically, they're not like contributing to the world necessarily. They're building out the brain because they're doing it through these life experiences. So early trauma can really interfere with that, but so can, mom's nervous system and being able to connect with that little one and reach their needs too.
Man, there's so much I don't know. I feel like I've already learned more. I've already learned more in 15 minutes than I did in 4 years of college.
I love this stuff. I'm a learner, so I do love this.
Well, and I think it was your post I saw this morning that your brain is still developing, or it's only 25%. The prefrontal cortex is only 25% developed.
Yep.
At 5 years old.
Yep.
And your kids, when they don't listen the first time, they literally can't. And I got home from the gym and I sat all the kids down there eating breakfast, and I was like, kids, I need to apologize. And then my wife's like looking at me. I'm like, for all the times you ignored me when I asked you to do something, it's because you couldn't. Like,
right?
Physically, you couldn't.
They did have a
So
skill.
I'm sorry.
That's good. That is good recognition. That's awesome.
So then, what are some common ways to throw off the nervous system? And then how do you combat that and get it back in check?
Yeah, well, those are all great questions. So the first things that we discussed as far as birth trauma, post birth and what happens, but there's three different forms of stress that the body can go through. It can go through physical stress, it can go through chemical stressors, and it can go through emotional stressors. And all three of those are going to, like I was saying before, kind of stack up against them. Now, we're designed to be adaptable. We're designed to be resilient. We're designed to handle and manage stress. But if we have a nervous system that was almost like pre-stressed, we were born stressed out, maybe mom was stressed, like we mentioned, now this nervous system stressed, and we are now building out the brain, well, it's in this state of fight or flight. So those emotional stressors, those physical stressors, and those chemical stressors are going to have a bigger toll than they would on a nervous system that is adaptable, that's learning, that's taking life's experiences and building itself out, because we're always live wiring. The brain is constantly live wiring. It learns through every experience that we're having. Well, if we're in this state of fight or flight, often that input to the brain or that perception of what's happening is being filtered through this lens of stress and fight or flight. So where something, might even have this heightened emotional response because the brain's already in protection, and now, like dad's the enemy because he told me to do this, and you're like, this, it just perpetuates that fight or flight response. What we do to combat that, as far as nervous system focused chiropractic care, is we're measuring it on the scans, we're finding it in their bodies, we're looking at the tone of the body, and most importantly, we're removing what we call the subluxation, which is where the nervous system is stuck, where the stress is stuck, what body system is it affecting, what brain area is it affecting, and then giving families tips and tools along the way to ensure that we are keeping the nervous system calm. So sometimes it's educating families and it's all going to be kind of situational of, screens, for example. Hey, about that prefrontal cortex, they don't know reality yet. So you throwing them in front of a screen is the altering that information, those early childhood experiences that they're seeing on that screen. The brain doesn't have the filtering process yet to know if that's reality or not. So that can really confuse the nervous system.
What a
Games.
trip.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's wild with and blue lights. So like, turning things down, dim your lights before bed. Let their body know it's time to calm down.
So that's why my wife is that. That's why my wife does all these things.
Yeah. Oh, does she?
She's oh yeah,
Helping
she's
your
like
nervous system's at,
the lights. I'm like, can we turn a light on around here? I can't see anything.
right?
Like, no, don't turn it on.
Yeah, we're often looking to stimulate our nervous system. So we have a kid that loves the bright lights and flashing screens. They're like, well, that's when they sit still. And I'm like, well, that's the one thing that's keeping their brain in the state that it only knows, which is fight or flight. So they want that screen, they want that input. So it can be a lot of that. Some of it would be, even going backwards in development, and they will, as you start working with a child where they started falling short in that brain build out that we had talked about, you're going to see them retrace that. So they might start acting like a 2-year-old for a little bit, even though they're 7, and you might want to kill me. You're like, what just happened? And you're like, no, that's the nervous system getting curious and remaking those connections that they missed out on. And it's a little messy sometimes in the middle. We warn parents, it can get messy. You can see stress leaving their body. You can see these new connections being made. Think about what a 2-year-old wants to do. They want to be curious. So that's probably what a kid is doing. They're being curious. They're touching things. They're experimenting with stuff. They're, maybe having a meltdown for a little bit, but it doesn't last forever by any means. You allow that nervous system then the space to heal, and the parents understand that healing process. It goes a lot quicker. So maybe that would be a 7-year-old, for example, and maybe they skipped crawling.
Wow.
Maybe they skipped crawling. That's a big deal. We might have them get down on the floor and crawl around.
Hmm.
Yeah, there's a lot of
That's
things you can do.
that's just like, I feel like you were describing my 9-year-old. It's
Really?
interesting because, well, they've had a pretty traumatic year,
Mm-hmm.
and it continues to be traumatic at some days. And he always seems like he wants to be treated the same as my 3-year-old.
Mm.
And it's always a huge fight and like meltdown. So that makes sense, everything you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. That's
Yeah.
crazy. So I need to get everybody in there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm obviously pretty biased on nervous system focused chiropractic care, but when you look at kids and you look at their nervous system and the way that it's developing and to get those clear connections so that they have the best outcomes later on, I'm jealous of them, honestly. It's like, it's incredible. And now they get to their adult life and you're, instead of, like just skimming the crap off the top of the pool instead of having to drain it and start over because there's so much stress that had built up in the body, now they're way more resilient and there's less stressors that you're managing at that point.
Yeah. So then, what are your thoughts on regressive autism? There's thousands of parents who have stories of their child regressing into profound autism, is amongst other things, like, whatever the causes are, environment, blah, blah, blah. How big of a play is the nervous system at in this scenario?
Huge. So
Yeah.
huge. Yeah. It is really an incredible player in their life. Talk about a nervous system that's overwhelmed and confused, because our nervous system can get overwhelmed and we can be in fight or flight. And that might be, if you're a child and you're developing yourself into fight or flight, that might be a kid that looks like ADHD, for example.
Yeah.
The kid that can't still, they can't listen, they can't focus, they're kind of bouncing off the walls. But your nervous system can also get confused. And when your nervous system's overwhelmed and it's confused, now it doesn't know what to do with those signals. Now the connection between the brain and the body is not only, sped up, if you will, for fight or flight, but also those signals are abnormal. We call them aberrant signals, or information that's coming towards the brain is afferent. We call disafferentation. So those abnormal signals to the brain are causing things to be even more confusing. So most people, or even practitioners, they like to measure the symptoms or the output of what's happening. So they can list all these symptoms out of, like, okay, well, they're not making eye contact, they're not talking well, they got low body tone, and they're unorganized, they may be having meltdowns, like all these things that somebody on the spectrum may have. So they can categorize them, and that's fine. Instead of looking at, well, what's the input? Because input equals output. How's the
Mm.
nervous system taking this information? The very same environment that you and I are sitting in, that we're perceiving this information, nice and clear, where this child on the spectrum is perceiving it as a fight or flight. They can't sit still, they're overwhelmed. Let's look at why the perception is off. And when you're looking at the function of the nervous system, its goal, or what it function is to do, is to perceive the environment and coordinate the behavior of every other cell. Well, the perception's off, the coordination's off, and of course then therefore the behavior is going to be off, and you can list out the behaviors or list out the symptoms that they're having. And as a chiropractor, we go back to, let's look at the nervous system and the input. Let's see what could go right here. We don't put them in a box. We don't put a diagnosis on any child. No nervous system chiropractor does, nor is nervous system focused chiropractic a treatment for anything. It is a way to get your nervous system to the place that it can handle life's stressors better. And in many cases, when we get down to that foundation, there's less intervention that's needed in other areas because the nervous system worked out its own kinks. It's like, oh yeah, I don't know why I
Mm.
was behaving that way. Like, we don't need cognitive behavioral therapy. Like, oh, now they're all of a sudden they're organized, and they're, the OT is like, dang, dude, there's kids like just accelerating in life. Or like, yep, same thing with speech therapy. They went from 5 words to 500 because now the brain could execute that information better. And it's not that any of those
Wow.
therapies are, not needed or wrong, or anything with the therapy. It's usually the therapist working this uphill battle through a nervous system that's overwhelmed and confused, and expected to get the outcomes of, what therapy was designed for, but it's being sent through a nervous system that can't handle it and can't perceive it. So once you get that worked on, the nervous system, with the nervous system focused chiropractic care, we have less length in many of those therapies, and sometimes some of them aren't needed at all, or they graduate out of them. It's really incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. So the nervous system it's
The
the
thing
motherboard, it's the
is,
root, it's
yeah,
the root of everything. So it's essentially like that needs to be worked on. Everything else should be worked on, but if you don't work on the nervous system, none of that's really going to do anything.
yeah. I mean, even digestion.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
even digestion or detoxing. When you talk about regressive autism, a lot of the times some of the families will, not a lot, but many families will report, it was at this certain age or it was after this certain scheduled MD.
vaccine,
Yeah,
18
I know if you
months.
want me to say that or not.
You
And all
could
of a sudden
say
you're
it.
like, great, now we gave a neurotoxin to the body and the brain, and we're trying to see how it can manage those neurological toxins and this overwhelm that's happening in their body, and the brain and body can't handle it. Now they start regressing. And a really amazing thing, Zach, that we've started to look at with kids with autism. I don't know if you do you like research. I just keep talking about like research things, but they were looking at
Yeah,
children who had autism later on. So they weren't diagnosed necessarily at birth. But these children happened to have an MRI of their brain. Maybe something happened in the birth process. They looked at the cerebral spinal fluid. Cerebral spinal fluid is that liquid that is nourishing the brain. So you've got your spinal cord, you've got your brain, and it has these dural sheaths around it. If you've heard of that, it's this protective fascia that goes around it. That's what many people have to like puncture, like a spinal puncture. You got to puncture through the duro to get into the cerebral spinal fluid. We're going to suck some of that liquid out to test something, for example. Cerebral spinal fluid floats between that brain and the dural sheaths. It's a protective mechanism for the brain. If we didn't have it, we actually couldn't. We would damage our own brain. I don't know if you knew that, because it's floating in this liquid. It needs to be. Well, cerebral spinal fluid carries nutrients throughout the nervous system, and it also detoxifies. So it's taking out metabolic waste from the brain and the nervous system, and also carrying the nutrients. And what they found in these children is there was a huge buildup of cerebral spinal fluid in the brain already, even before autism was being diagnosed. So now, they're usually not diagnosing autism until like 18 months to 3 years old. Now they get to that time frame, and they've had either regressive autism, or they weren't showing those signs, or all of a sudden autism is the diagnosis. And they looked back at these MRIs. Those children had buildup of CSF, which is cerebral spinal fluid, near birth. So when we're talking about that birth stress, like I had mentioned early on, what's going to stop cerebral spinal fluid from flowing appropriately? Damage to the head and neck. That's what's going to stop it from flowing
oh,
appropriately. There's way too much tension to help that happen. There's often twisting and tugging that has to happen in order for them to get out. And that cerebral spinal fluid is moving too slow, so now it can't detoxify. So you've given this injectable poison that the brain can't detoxify from. And it's like you and I just painting a room and not opening the windows. They can't escape the poison that's in there. It can't even carry it out. It's not even filtering it through. And we're also expecting them then to learn, grow, develop, all while floating in a boat of toxins. It's not,
wow.
yeah, not going to work for them.
That was an awesome explanation. That just confirmed everything in my head.
Did it? Okay, well, good. Yeah, it's
I saw it's September, right? And there's going to be an announcement for all the research that's being done on finding a cause for autism. I mean, the way you just explained it, it seems pretty self-explanatory. It
yeah,
was
we
kind
can't
of
process all this.
doom. Yeah, and I've always thought, I mean, from an objective standpoint and logically, that perhaps the vaccine is the tipping point
Mm-hmm.
from everything
Absolutely.
else that's been going on.
Yep.
And, probably going to get some haters for saying that, but it's just like if you line up everything from birth, makes sense to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Anyways,
Well, that's why other countries move to, if they're vaccinating, they move to a schedule of 18 months to 2 years old when they're not doing for the nervous system, but nervous system is more developed, where the immune system is actually making its own antibodies. Instead, they're, pumping them in every 2 months, because the immune system isn't even designed to make those IgG antibodies and memory cells at that point. They're not making it till that side of their immune system isn't even developed until 18 months to 2 years. So why are we pumping them full of something they're supposed to make a immune cell memory cell to, when they don't even have the capability to? It just doesn't even make sense. Yeah.
have you seen The Business of Being Born on Netflix?
I think I have. It's been a while, but I think I have.
It's all about C-section and
Yes.
scheduled
Yes.
scheduled birth.
Yep.
It's
And
all
it just,
fascinating.
yeah. Well, and C-section was designed to save lives,
Right.
and it's so
It
necessary
saved
when
my
it is.
fourth.
Yep. It saved my third. That we would have both
Yeah.
died. I had a complete previa. He couldn't have come out of my vagina. We'd have both been
Right.
dead. So it's awesome, but it's not for everyone. It should be the last resort. But unfortunately, the people are scheduling and they're told they couldn't have, the baby naturally, or the pelvis is too small, the baby's head's too big, you're too old. They've got every excuse in the book to force a woman into this. And honestly, it's kind of easy for the practitioner. You're on duty and you're like, let's cut out the next one. I'm going to be here. And we could just
Yeah.
safely control this birth, when unfortunately if maybe that same OB was that baby's pediatrician, they might realize that the kids that they're pulling out by the head and neck aren't faring so well.
Do they pull them out like
Have you seen a
gently?
video?
No.
Oh
Is it
man.
just aggressive?
Oh, gnarly. It's gnarly. They'll use up to 120 pounds of pressure. 140 is decapitation. That's what they'll pull it at. They have meters now that they can use on the head and neck to make sure they're not overdoing it, because, not to be gruesome, but that's happened. Decapitation has happened. And it's over 60 pounds of pressure in some just natural vaginal birth scenarios. There's a lot of pressure that goes on the head and neck. That's why it's designed, the head's designed to squeeze and the baby's designed to come out occiput first, the chin tucked. But it's a gruesome process. And what's interesting is I teach workshops to parents and providers to educate them on this. Because I will say, then the thing that really lit me up the most is when I found out how much birth contributed and we're not talking about it. And I remember one practitioner telling me, like, she knew that this was contributing. This is a lady that owned a different type of center when I had my son evaluated and what's going on with his brain. And she's like, and I asked her why, because I am the why person. Like, why do you think this is going on? And she had said, well, I really think the way that, we've started to birth in America has really changed, and it's interfering with, the development of children. But I don't want to tell moms that because I don't want them to feel guilty. And I was like, moms want to know. Like, we're on the hunt to heal our kids. Like, moms want to know. So I just really got passionate about it. The more I heard, like, we want to know. So I started teaching these workshops to educate families on that. So they might have some dots being connected, like, oh yeah, that birth was really rough. Oh yeah, like I was in a really rough state when I was pregnant, and during the delivery, or didn't have much support after, and my child was colicky or whatever. And I had a labor and delivery nurse and an OB in my front row. And I play a video of a C-section birth when they watch it. And most families are like, what? And with these doctors in this C-section video that I show, they're just whistling. They're like having a good old time. They're just totally fine. This is not an emergency to them. They're like, do, 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 do. They're literally whistling. They cut out the baby. They stick a vacuum on the head. And they're like, and it pops out the head. And then the baby's head's there. They're still whistling. And then they get a hold of it, and you just watch them bend, yank this baby out of the birth canal. And everyone's like, like they just had no idea that's what it looked like. And the labor and delivery nurse had said, well, yeah, they're really malleable, and pliable. And the OB had said, yeah, right. The OB had said, it's not a gentle process. I delivered a lot of kids like that. And that's when I think the labor and delivery nurse was trying to defend them, like, well, they're really malleable and pliable. That's what they teach us in school. And my husband kind of piped up from the back. He said, would you allow someone to do that to your son or your child? And she's like, no, I'd shoot you. And he's like, why are you trying to convince us that it's, something different? But yeah, most people can watch that video and realize, like, that's not ideal for a head and neck of an infant.
That is wild. I thought
It
they
is.
just came right out.
No, there's midwives. Honestly, there's midwives, because it doesn't have to be a C-section. There's doctors that are like, oh, the baby's not coming out exactly how they want them. Perhaps it's because the woman's lying on the back and not using gravity, for her, because that's convenient also to be at the height of the table for the doctor to see, where they're using their hands to yank and kind of pull and tug and, get the baby out, vacuum, forceps. Even during vaginal births, that's, pretty common practice that we'll find. I do know midwives typically are trained to never touch the head and neck. They will actually try to get up and pull by the shoulders, the armpits, if they can, if there's a problem where mom needs assistance, like all of a sudden this is getting emergent and we need to do something about it. But most midwives are midwives because they trust the birth process and they empower women to know that we were designed to do this, and they save that space for those women to be calm in their nervous system and feel safe so they can go into birth and go into labor to have a healthy birth. Midwives know, for the most part. Yeah, it doesn't feel like a secret. Um, you're like, you pull a kid by the head and neck, you're gonna jack it up.
Yeah. It
Mm-hmm.
seems like the way culture is going in society, every new advancement, technological innovation, whatever, is kind of going in direct conflict with our nervous systems. And we're living in an age and a time where all that throws off your nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to work pretty hard to get it back to where it needs to be. Tell me about what you did with your son and
Yeah.
all the success you had with him. And is that when kind of you switched over from a crack your neck
Mm-hmm.
chiropractor
The
to
backcracker.
nervous system?
Yeah.
The back cracker,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep. It was. Like I said, I was a chiropractor for 7 years, had the training, thought I wanted to work with women and kids, but once again, you're not taught that in school. But it was always kind of something that I was pretty interested in. And people brought my kids, they're kids to me, but basic kids. Like I remember the first time somebody brought me a headbanging autistic child to me, and I was like, well, I don't know why they're doing that. Well, now I know they're looking for input in the brain. They're looking to break this tension up that's here. But my son was about 3 at the time when I was pregnant with my third, and we started noticing and already knew. So he's my second born. We already knew he wasn't my firstborn. Like my firstborn is very neuroatypical, just organized, coordinated, talked early. Just I didn't know, I'm sure I thought I was like the grand champion of parents because I had this kid that just like raised himself, like sent him to Montessori, and it just continued on. Like this kid, we're like, I don't know how he did it. He raised himself. It was me and Jesus. Like I don't, I can't, I have no idea how this kid did this. And then I had my second born who wasn't developing like my oldest was, and he was just he was pretty uncoordinated. He was shy, but he was that more disconnected nervous system. He wasn't the amped nervous system, the fight or flight one. He was the confused signals nervous system side. We've got the fight or flight side, we've got the confused side, and then once again, when you mix it together, fight or flight and confused is usually the kids that get diagnosed on the spectrum. So my second was the really unorganized nervous system. Hindsight's 2020, so I can look back and see where like all these little signs had added up. But it really wasn't until he was in preschool. He did the same program my older son did. They're 4 years apart. And he didn't learn the things that my oldest son did at that Montessori classroom. He couldn't hold a pencil. He couldn't read. He couldn't recognize his name. We tried numbers 1 through 10 a billion times, and he could recognize 1, 2, and 3 after a lot of work. They'd flip up his name, like, here's his name, you get excused to lunch, and like he would just stare at it and everybody would be like, dude, that's your name. And they're 3 to 6 year olds. And he always just kind of hung out with one kid, and I just thought that was his personality, which it still is, just a little bit more shy. He's drawn to not a crowd, but like 1 or 2 people to connect with. But then pretty soon, his speech just wasn't catching up with others. And I knew it, like the hard consonants were difficult for him. So, and his teacher was finally like, mate, let's start somewhere. I feel like we should start with his speech. Like I'm trying to do all these adaptive things for him, like giving him something to work on his pincher grasp and adaptive things for his pencil. She's like, let's start with speech. And so I was like, oh, okay, and I was like, well, and once again, just a naive parent, when he would say things that weren't right, we were like repeating it. This sounds so stupid when you say it out loud. You're like, to say, let's go upstairs, he'd say upstairs. And then we're like, let's go upstairs. And she's like, well, why would you repeat the wrong word? You know what I mean? You're like, I don't know. I guess it does sound really dumb. So we started by saying the right word.
Yeah.
And when I had him evaluated, the speech therapist, she was like, yeah, he really has these, trouble. We should work with his tongue. But she has this plan for him. And I just thought, well, why? Why is he having a hard time enunciating his words when his brother didn't? And once again, I wasn't trying to compare the two, but I just thought, well, that's weird. Like what's off in him that he can't do that? And then finally the teacher was like, and we just love this teacher, and he was also Miss Christie. She was like, I don't think he's focusing on his words. He kind of had this eyeball that would wander off, and he'd do these like motor ticks with his neck and like stuff like this. And I would watch him. I'm like, you're right. This like kind of eyeball wanders, and he's kind of doing these awkward like face things. And even when he's not, I'm like, what are you doing, bud? And he's like watching a show and just ticking. So I was like, this is really weird. And that's when I took him to that center to like have his brain evaluated, like how is his brain processing the world here, and that's the practitioner that had told me the thing about birth. But I also wanted to know, well, why is the right and left side of his brain not connected? That doesn't make, to me, like, well, why is it there? And then it went on and on, like to the vision therapist. Yep, he's not focusing. His eye is off track and he needs to like focus. And so we have this vision therapy to do in these special glasses. And we got the glasses. But once again, I was like, well, why aren't his eyes tracking? Why aren't his eyes strong? Why aren't they aligning? So I was willing to do all these therapies. I was willing to. I just needed to know why. And I also needed to know why his brain wasn't learning and why he couldn't retain information. Because all along, this kid is having meltdown after meltdown in the home. He's waking up having night terrors. He's being really defiant and not following directions at home. Like there was other emotional components that were adding into this. And of course, then you're told like, oh, he just needs a spanking. And you're like, that's it, lady. It was the spanking we missed that he's not learning. You got it. And so that span of 3 to 5 years is when we were going through all of this. And his teacher finally said, like, look, he can't go to kindergarten next year. We're setting him up for failure. This isn't going to work. And that's when I was like, well, crap, like something's really wrong with him. Like there's all these things and something's really wrong. What am I going to do about it? Because I see these options to manage his symptoms, but that didn't answer to me why. And then my husband had graduated with Dr. Tony Ebel, the PX docs, the one that you were talking about, that had already been working with kids like Landon with nervous system development issues, and had been doing things for a decade. He already had a training program. He had these neurological scans on how to read them and look at, the nervous system development and start recognizing these and make appropriate care plans and adjustments for these children so they can get past these nervous system stuck points. And I was like, well, that makes sense. Like that makes sense. So the first time, so of course I did his entire training program and flew out to Colorado to buy these, it's called the inside scanning technology, to say I need to learn this. Scanned my son and it was super chaotic, like unorganized nervous system. Like, there it is. His nervous system's unorganized. Wow. So of course he's having all these issues. So he was my first nervous system focused kid, a care plan kid. I put him on a 6-month care plan, and we've actually written up a case study on him. He's published in medical journals, actually.
Oh, wow.
I know. So cool. And he, all of a sudden, his body started getting coordinated. He was like throwing and catching a ball. All of a sudden, I don't even remember when he started sleeping through the night. He just wasn't having night terrors anymore. His teacher was like, he hasn't worn those glasses in months. He had already taken them off because his eyeballs lined up and started to focus. His speech cleared up. His behavior had changed. And it was slow. It was gradual enough to where all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, when's the last time he did that? Like he hasn't done that in such a long time. Like I used to have this mat underneath my bed, a camping mat, because I was nursing my third son, and in my middle, he'd come in my room having this night terror or scared or want to sleep with me. And so I was like, hey buddy, when you come in here, what I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you take this mat out and sleep on it. I'm going to know that you're there. You don't even need to tell me you're coming in because I am very tired. I'm like being woke, 4 times in the night to feed this infant. I was like, I want to be a really good mommy, and I am not when I haven't slept. So like, let's just do the mat thing.
Right.
And it wasn't until we moved one year when I pulled the camping mat out from underneath the master bedroom bed, and I was like, whoa, I don't know when he stopped doing that. But I do remember my biggest fear for him was high school. I was like, I don't know if this is what we're dealing with now. I don't know what high school is going to look like. And I want to figure out how his brain learns so I could work with him so he can accomplish great things still. And gratefully, when we did the nervous system focused chiropractic care, that hasn't been a worry. And he's in high school now. He's going to be 16 next month and thriving. He got, athlete of the year last year for football, like
No
offensive
way.
for being the wide receiver. He qualified for state as a freshman in the 200 meter, where like he couldn't even run a straight line to save his life, when he was little. There's just so many things that were, just plaguing his body and his nervous system that worked themselves out. So I think the only therapy we ended up doing was in first grade. We got him a reading tutor to get him caught up on reading, and man, just thriving. It's incredible. So I knew as soon as Landon made that turnaround, I was like, there's no way I am doing one more back cracking in this office. What we aren't dealing with back pain. We are dealing with children and their nervous system. So we just kind of dumped that old model of practice that we were doing and rebranded. And I mean, it was still called purpose driven chiropractic, but I went all in for nervous system and kid focused and teaching courses because I didn't want any more parents looking for these kind of answers when we're like, it was right there all along to help your child's nervous system so that they can achieve the best outcomes. Because I know what it does to the parenting, I know what it does to the siblings, I know what it does to the marriage. It's difficult, when you're dealing with this one kid that needs so much attention in order to just, live their day. So that's where we went and never looked back. It was
So
a very
then
long
during
story.
all, no, that was amazing. It's interesting to me because I've gone to conferences on autism, and I've done tons of research, and I've until like 2 weeks ago I've never come across nervous system chiropractic as a therapy. I've heard everything else, but
Mm-hmm.
why do you think it's not talked about, or is it and I just missed it?
I don't, that's a great question. I don't know if I really necessarily have the answer. I do know that when you're looking at AMA stuff, so American Medical Association and insurance, they will cover everything but nervous system focused chiropractic care. So they're not interested in that.
That's how you know it's good.
Yeah. So they are offered other things that are covered by insurances, so potentially that. I don't necessarily know. I know Dr. Ebel, Tony Ebel, the one from PX. I know he used to sit on a board of Autism Today or something like that, and did a lot to help out in that autism world to really help these parents find out about the nervous system and understand healing that nervous system could really unlock a lot of things for their kids. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's a good question.
Huh. So then how during those when you had your son start nervous system chiropractic, I know for a lot of parents who have special needs children, autistic children, whatever, they they live in fight or flight for a
Mhm.
majority of their day.
Yes, they
And
do.
so the parents' nervous system, it's got to be just as important as the kids.
Mhm.
How did you, during your time healing your son, take care of yourself?
That's a great
Or
question.
did you? Like, yeah.
I think I'm playing catch up 10 years later. But
Uh-huh.
but still, I mean, I did the same, nervous system focused chiropractic care for myself and get myself scanned. It's really important, all of our team does because you obviously have to take care of yourself. If you're in a state of fight or flight, like you aren't doing nothing to heal somebody else. So that's definitely a huge piece of it. I learn best through reading and learning about different ways to, just like even calm the state of your nervous system. So journaling was a huge thing for me. It still is,
Journaling.
where, I've got some journal prompts actually right over here because that's what I do to look at one of those prompts to be like, oh, okay, so what am I grateful for and how can I show my appreciation and gratitude? And I know when you're in gratitude, you can't be in fear, fight or flight or lack. You're looking straight into gratitude. And I would say I have little tips and stuff that I do in my home. Like I have a wellness thing, like infrared sauna, and I got a PMF mat and a hyper rice.
Okay.
I go on walks in the morning. I kind of follow all of that to know what's going to fuel my nervous system as well. Because more than just my middle son that I was taking care of. Now, 10 years later, it's all these children that are in the office and they are all in fight or flight. Not all, but many of them are in fight or flight. And the calmer you are in that situation, they are going to feel that presence. So they're going to be calmer. And it doesn't mean I haven't been kicked, hit, bit, head butted, thrown, somebody threw a chair at me. You gotta chase them. You got swung at. You gotta pull them out from underneath a chair to get them adjusted. Like we gotta be, we're kind of sneaky little ninjas to get in there to get it done. And some of the parents are helpful, and some are like, "Good luck." I gotta sit down here for a minute because I've been dealing with this all day. Yeah. But it's, you're on your toes, but ultimately every kid calms down and you'll get a different child. And, it's not going to last forever. They're not going to be that child that comes in that office, in a few weeks. That's not what you're going to be dealing with. So there's a little, uphill battle you got to fight when they first come in with them, but they'll ultimately trust you and get on that table. And even though sometimes some of them will lay on the table and say no, they don't move their body. It's like they're, it's like their innate knows, like they need this, like, no. You're not fighting me. Your conscious brain is, but your unconscious is saying, please help me. Some of them even put your hands where and it really will be their subluxation that day. They'll put their hands up there and do this to you. And it's pretty incredible. Yeah. It's pretty incredible. So it's daily though. To take care of my nervous system, it's intentional every single day. Just like your wife, it sounds like turn off the lights, get off the blue screens, things that are going to stimulate you. Take my magnesium glycinate before I go to bed. Cortisol manager, all that kind of stuff.
Earthing and
yep. Oh yeah, barefoot in the grass. Yep.
All the above, which, it is just trying to get yourself back to that state of calm. Because nothing around us in life is calm. And that's interesting too with the electromagnetic pulses, the PEMF and all that. Surfers. I'm a big surfer.
Oh, yeah.
And when I get out of the ocean, and I learned this when we were in Mexico for my wife's cancer treatment, like the ocean is like the mother of all electromagnetic charges for yourself naturally. And surfers, like when you get a good session or you're just in the water and you get out, there is like nothing for at least a couple hours that will like tip me off.
Yeah.
I'm just like, yeah, whatever.
So cool.
Life is great. And it's because I was just getting charged for 2 hours.
Yeah. That's incredible. I love that. Yeah. We teach an analogy to families about the lid. Have you ever heard like the lid off analogy with the brain, where you blow your lid or, the lid has come off? I learned this from, therapists talk about it, I think, but there's a researcher in chiropractic, Dr. Heidi Horvick. She's in New Zealand, and she was a chiropractor that was born into a very Western medicine family. But she found chiropractic, but she felt like she needed to prove, what chiropractic was doing, because there wasn't a ton of research. Like people were like, what you're cracking their back and now they talk? Like, what the heck's happening, lady? And instead she found all of the areas of the brain that are being influenced. So it's the pathways that are being cleared up. Now there's different pathways that are like, now we can execute this function that we were missing out on. And one of the biggest areas being the prefrontal cortex. So the lid to our brain. And our prefrontal cortex does all executive functioning. It helps us pre-plan our movements, think through a process, feel safe and calm, and be able to connect with others. When our lid is on, now we've got balance between our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. That's kind of like the highest place our nervous system can be, so highest frequency. Now, when we're under a state of fight or flight, kind of depending, on the stressor that's in front of you, you're going to disengage that prefrontal cortex to some degree. So then there's some people that their prefrontal cortex is not well engaged, it's not strong, the highest or strongest part of their nervous system can't maintain balance for very long. So they're going to flip their lid off a lot sooner, and your hindbrain's going to take over. That's your amygdala that makes you very impulsive, very reactive. This is that emotional center where it's like, you're in your logical brain and you're having a conversation with this brain, you're not going to get through to it because they are in fight or flight. So what they find is getting that prefrontal cortex re-engaged with the adjustments, those nervous system focused adjustments actually sync the right and left side of the brain together, the prefrontal cortex, and re-engage it. It starts to strengthen those pathways. And now we can get somebody in a calmer state where their nervous system has this opportunity to be at a state of calm or a state of connection, where now the information that's coming to their brain is not coming through fight or flight. You're making different pathways. Now you're building out the brain differently. The life experiences that are happening to you are happening through an entirely different lens. And that's just one of the brain centers that are, changed by chiropractic care. But as soon as families start to understand, like, hey, my kid's lid's off and a conversation between this and this isn't going to match up, you got to wait till they calm down at least. And if you're their, regulation, then sometimes you have to be. And sometimes if you can't regulate and both lids are off, you got to figure out what you want to do about that. You got to have a game plan for that. Walk away if they're not safe. Obviously, you need to keep them safe. But a conversation or yelling or whatever you're trying to do to regulate each other it's not going to work. So the more you can get your body here, the more effective you're going to be in everything in life.
Yeah. What are some free, like, basic things parents can do to support their system?
Yeah, well, it sounds like ocean. If you're lucky enough to be by the ocean, that's amazing. Barefoot on the grass, that kind of grounding, just breathing, breathing with your belly or diaphragm. People are we're so reactive. We're breathing with our chest. We're anxious. We're tight, like, all the time, and that's going to elicit fight or flight. So just shutting your mouth, putting the fat part of your tongue on the roof of your mouth, that also elicits your vagus nerve. I know we didn't talk about the vagus nerve, but that's a part of the nervous system that does calm and regulation and that parasympathetic side. Tongue on the roof of your mouth, and you're breathing with your diaphragm. And so your diaphragm is that muscle that's underneath the lungs that help pull the lungs this way instead of expanding front to back like fight or flight does, like that chest breathing does. And you start to pull it this way. Well, your vagus nerve is a brainstem nerve, also largely interrupted in birth trauma. But you've got 12 cranial nerves. 2 actually leave the cranial vault. And one of them, and the biggest one of our entire body, is the vagus nerve. Vagus means wandering. So it's got to come out through your head to brainstem to the neck. And it wanders throughout every single organ and gland. It's the most robust nerve that we have. 9 times more fibers than any other fiber in the body. So if you want to elicit vagus nerve, when you're belly breathing, you're also stimulating it as well. And also actually helping digestion. That little squeeze that you're doing as you pull down that diaphragm, you're also squishing, peristalsis and helping squish out, your liver and things like that, just helping stimulate your vagus nerve. And that's going to bring on some more calm in your body, because sympathetic and parasympathetic have to be in balance. The more we practice fight or flight, we're learning through a fight or flight experience. We're eliciting those pathways, nerves that fire together, wire together, if you've ever heard that. Well, now we got to combat it with strengthening that parasympathetic nervous system so that it can, when the sympathetic nervous system engages, it can come down a lot quicker than it would be. I'm sure you've seen kids where, like, their meltdowns are up here and they're forever, and then they all of a sudden they calm down, and you're like, dude, that's a poor parasympathetic nerve function. Likely they've got some vagus nerve dysfunctions, and that's a really good way to do it. Now, you're probably not going to tell a 3-year-old, like, put the fat part of your tongue on the roof of your mouth and breathe with your belly. So it's humming for them, blowing bubbles for them, like little, probably annoying as crap for parents, but like little train whistles or something, go outside and do. That's going to also do the same stimulation to that vagus nerve. Blowing bubbles even in cold water, those are great ways to stimulate vagus nerve.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So how fast can, like, say you get your nervous system back to calm, how fast can it get thrown off again? Like, within an hour?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's kind of a great question. It usually depends on how long it's been there in the first place, like how strong are those pathways. So a lot of what we do in the beginning is investigating how long this person's been in fight or flight. And we have something called heart rate variability that we can measure. So if we know somebody's got a weak, sympathetic and parasympathetic response, because sometimes we've got both, because the nervous system does hit a point of exhaustion over time where it's not recovering at all, then we're going to know that person's going to have a lot harder time getting regulated, if you will. So you might get an adjustment and, like, the body feels calm for some time, and then it might, get re-triggered really quickly because of, it's so used to that protective mechanism. It's going to be an accumulation of those adjustments. They're going to build, because now you've had more time being calm, and now all of a sudden the nervous system's like, oh, I've learned how to do this new thing, like playing the piano or riding a bike. It's like, oh, I actually have this skill now. Instead of, you threw someone in front of a piano that doesn't know how to play it. They're like, hitting middle C.
So then would you say like everything, chronic disease, cancer, illness, everything goes back to the nervous system because it's on overload, and at
Yeah,
some point it breaks down and
absolutely.
it can't tell your body how to function anymore?
How to heal. Yeah, we get over budget.
Wow.
Yeah, we get over budget. We talk about it as chiropractic. We've got like nerdy things that we say, but we talk about before disease is full blown disease, it's dis hyphen ease. There's not ease within the body before all of a sudden now it wasn't able to heal and repair. Now we've got full blown disease. So it gives us signs first. And when there's not ease within the nervous system, you're going to see where there's not going to be ease in other systems in the body either. So somebody that's been under stress patterns for a really long time, fight or flight, if you think about getting chased by a bear, for example, it's like the classic, or saber-toothed tiger, whatever people use. Like fight or flight is a great way to protect your body. It's not necessarily the enemy. It's keeping you alive, and that's the ultimate goal. Like your nervous system wants to keep you alive. So I'm in fight or flight. My heart rate's up. My blood pressure is up. My muscles are tense. I took the energy because we've got limited energy. I took the energy from my core and I brought it out to my big muscles to run and flee or fight. What I don't need is to digest my food. So digestion is going to turn down or turn off. What I don't need to do is fight off a virus. We're not going to put our energy there. The only thing in the immune system that's going to uptick is inflammation, because we need to be able to heal. If we're wounded in that fight or flight, we're going to want to heal that thing real quick. So inflammation is going to be high in the body. Our senses are going to be way turned up. We got to look, run and flee from this enemy. We're impulsive, we're reactive. Fight or flight, great short term. That bear stopped chasing you. Now you need to calm down. But the bear now is social media. It's, keeping up with the Joneses. It's just all the things that are overstimulating our nervous system. And we're constantly running from a bear. Pretty soon we're going to have digestive issues, or we're not going to be working, digesting our food. Our immune system isn't going to be working really well. We're going to have a ton of inflammation that's inside of the body. And I didn't mention this before, but with your hormones are going to shift. You're not like ready to reproduce by any means when you're in fight or flight. Instead, you're cortisol and adrenaline. So over time, you're going to have a shift in hormones. And usually, women are going to notice that first, as far as like menstrual irregularities and hormone dysregulation and a buildup of cortisol in the system. Is cortisol is the ultimate bully on the playground. It doesn't let estrogen play. It doesn't let testosterone play or progesterone or anything else. It's like, this is an emergency. I rule the land. So some of our bigger issues in America is high blood pressure, risk. This is just a sustained fight or flight response that we're having, where the body starts breaking down there. And then of course we've got a lot of, unfortunately, a lot of cancer. It sounds like your wife's dealing with that. And there's a lot of contributing factors to cancers. And then we've got hormone issues that are going on, and the list kind of goes on and on. Digestive issues, autoimmune conditions, all this stuff, because we've got an imbalance in the body, instead of, this like nice equilibrium that's happening where sympathetic can turn on, parasympathetic can turn on when it needs to. Because at night we should be able to settle down from sympathetic. Like our premotor cortex in the brain should shut off. We shouldn't be moving. We should be able to sleep through the entire night. The body now brings the energy from the core, or from the outside into the core, to detoxify the body, to repair any damaged cells that are there. It's a whole process at night. If we're not getting enough rest, we're not getting restful sleep, because our body's in this state of alert. Now we're missing out on the healing process. So another great thing about heart rate variability is we can measure that. Like, what's your healing capacity? And we look at that almost like a budget in a home, where it's like, you've been over budget for too long, so you're just keeping the lights on right now, sister. And as soon as you start getting more reserves in the nervous system, you'll watch the body heal and repair things that it needed to. So it's like, oh, we got some room in the budget. We need new floors. We need new roofs. We need new windows and doors, like same kind of thing in your body. Like, oh crap, that liver's overwhelmed. We're going to detoxify. We don't even need to say like, I'm going to adjust you so you detoxify. No, the body decides. It's like, oh crap, that liver needs to detoxify. And people are like, I just started crapping myself. And you're like, great, needed to get out. Awesome. Your body chose to do that because it's more connected now. It knows what to do. I don't get to choose. It does.
The human body is just
Fascinating. Isn't it fascinating?
bizarre. I don't know what your beliefs are in faith and all that, but I don't see how you can't believe in a God if once you start diving into the human body.
Yes, the organization, that's, you can't make that stuff up. Chaos doesn't organize into something, or that's going to function. It's there are
Well,
creators
and
and crafts.
just yeah, and just how the body is designed to heal itself.
Mm-hmm.
That is crazy.
That is our ultimate
Which
message to
is
parents.
yeah, which is bizarre. The whole Western medicine for cancer versus alternative medicine for cancer, complete opposites.
Mm-hmm. It really is. Yeah, you got
Uh,
to work the body.
so how? Okay, walk me through like all right, somebody. I think at this point, if you made it to this point in the podcast, you're pretty much sold. And if you're not sold, I don't know. I don't know. Where, how does like, so somebody signs up, they come see you at your office. I imagine like all the chiropractic care I've got from years of playing golf and through college, it was okay, I go in, they do some scans, they read me the scans, and for 15 years, I've been told my curve in my neck, it goes the wrong way.
Okay.
And so it always pops out up at the I don't know, the atlas or something.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so for years I go in, I get adjusted, it feels good, it pops back out within
Mm-hmm.
a week, and then I'm back in 2 weeks, blah blah blah.
Mm-hmm.
Where would it where does it be different with you?
Well, there's a lot to uncover on that one with a few things, but my first thing that I would recognize with something like that, because that sounds like it's a common story that people bring to us of like, hey, I had this thing and then it keeps coming back and it's never resolved itself. And it makes me realize that we didn't give it enough time to heal. We didn't get enough time and repetition to heal, because it's going to change the pattern once you do. Like, the body doesn't want to keep making that same mistake, but that's the pattern that it knows right now. So the nervous system holds patterns, and a pattern needs to be broken. So I think that's a number one complaint that people get. Like, I went to the chiropractor again and again, I kept on the same problems. And it's like, did you have a plan to take care of that issue, and then to measure and make sure that pattern in the nervous system broke, so that's not something that you're dealing with all of the time? And then just even address like the structural part of it with the bones. And I know people are like, a lot of times chiropractors are like, look, we just need this perfect spine, and if it looks like this, you're great. I would say you don't need perfect bones. It doesn't matter what the bones are doing. It matters what's inside of those bones and how those nerves are reacting, more so than the bones themselves, because we can live with, crooked spines and imperfections inside of our body. But if the communication isn't there, that's when the breakdown is going to be there. One of the things that, if you think about the nervous system in the lens of anesthesia, for example. So my nervous system is telling my muscles and my joints what to do and where to hold themselves. If I were to go and put you under anesthesia and I'm going to operate on you, I got to strap you to the table and hold you down, because you have no control over your body anymore. The nervous system's not alert. There's nothing holding tension in the muscles. There's nothing holding the joints in place. And so if you, for example, your leg were to fall off the table, the hip could pop out of joint, like you'd have a complete dislocation of the body, which is why they strap you in. And you can do anything, right? Like, people are flexible, they move people all over the place, whatever they need to get the surgery done. That's happening, and you're unaware. It's not until the nervous system re-engages when you wake up from the surgery that the communication between that area, the brain and the body, is now being like, oh, I got to hold tension here. I don't have a good connection. So the only thing I can do to protect you, because your brainstem's so important, is I have to hold tension here. And that's where you feel like, oh man, this just keeps going out. That's the state of the nervous system more than it is, a muscle or a joint issue. It's a nervous system issue. So change the pattern, which will change structure if it needs to, but nobody's bones have to be perfect. That's why we don't necessarily
Wow.
x-ray unless it's necessary in our office.
Okay. So do you do adjustments? Adjustments are involved?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. It is more so the specificity of the adjustments. The scans guide us through that. Also, the frequency of those adjustments. What we've learned is less is more. So if I need to break a pattern, I'm going to get one impulse into one area several times to break that pattern. So if all of a sudden I send all sorts of impulses into the body, which will happen frequently at chiropractors or even patients that are like, you're not going to crack me in more places. And you're like, well, I could, but it just overwhelmed the body. We're in the same pattern. We weren't going to get anywhere. But you're going to feel like you got your money's worth because you got popped in 8 places.
Right.
It is about breaking the pattern that's there. So it is being very specific about what issue you're tackling first. So what layer, once again, we call it a subluxation. So what nerve stress or subluxation state of the nervous system are we taking care of in that visit? And often it's in a set of 12 visits is usually what we'll know that we're going to change a pattern, and we're going to rescan the nervous system and see what progress it's made and where it's made its changes. And then we're going to go after the next set of scans. So typically, if you're coming to a nervous system focused chiropractor's office, they're going to have an intake for you to go, through. We're going to kind of see the story of your life through the lens of the nervous system and what stressors stacked up against you. Then we're going to measure it on these non-invasive neurological scans to see, well, how's the nervous system handling all the stress that you've been through? And one of the big pictures is that HRV. So now what kind of capacity do you have to heal? And then it's going to determine the plan. And we're going to say, hey, look, Zach, this is going to be about 6 months. And here's our plan with that. We're going to start you out at 3 days a week or 4 days a week. Some people that travel from me, to me from Washington, Oregon, distant locations, we're doing it twice in a day. They spend the night somewhere, again the next morning, and they head back home. And that input, the repetitive input, is just as impactful as like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, for example. So we'll have a game plan laid out for them to say, this is how many visits it's going to take. Here's how many rescans we're going to do. Here's your goals. Here's our goals. This is what we're going to look for first to know the nervous system's changing. We call them neurological soft signs that you're going to see first. And then we're going to expect by the end of this to achieve whatever it is that you're
Mm-hmm.
or we're not, or we're going to say, this is unrealistic. I'm sorry, but we can get you to this point, sort of a thing.
Yeah. Tell me about some successes you've seen.
Yeah.
Especially with kids on the spectrum or any kind of special needs.
Man, I have so many. I always say, like, that's my favorite story. I have so many favorite stories. I do. I've got a little guy, just to talk at a young age, and then I'll talk like middle and then a little bit older, a child on the spectrum. And came to us about, I think he was between the ages of 3 and 4. And right now, I will tell you right now, Zach, 3 and 4-year-old boys that were COVID babies, man, their mom's nervous systems were wrecked during COVID. They had no birth support, and we are
oh my gosh.
today in our 4 and now I guess they're about 5. So many kids started flooding into my office with emotional dysregulation, speech delays, motor delays, developmental stuff, and those COVID babies. I mean, we knew this was going to have a ripple effect, but we are seeing it. So he was one of them. We had a whole mitt of 4-year-old boys in the office about the same time. And I am great at understanding toddler gibberish and talk and stuff like that. This 3-year-old boy looked at me and said something, and I was like, whoa, wait, what? And it was literally like he was talking some foreign language. He had his own gibberish thing. I couldn't understand a lick of what he was saying. And his mom's like, dude, we've been doing years of speech therapy and we've gotten nowhere. And now he's getting ready to start school. And like, we've got these meltdowns. We have, all this stuff going on. It was within months that he started talking. And this kid, with everything else that was going on in his nervous system, he had a 7-month care plan. His mom was driving an hour trip, round trip, 72 times she came into the office, and she followed what we said, because what will happen with a child that's like that on the spectrum of like, okay, well, he's got speech delays, he's got motor delays, he's got behavior issues, he's got a detox that needs to happen, and the parents just want to go after it and do it all. Well, we don't have a nervous system that has the capacity to do that yet. So if we start adding in these other therapies, we start adding in this detox, we start changing his diet, we start adding in these supplements, whatever it is that we want to do to change this, we are going to overwhelm the system. We're going to jam this up. They're not going to be able to do. You're not going to feel like this is effective. Let's take care of his nervous system first, and then we'll take a look at what else needs to be done. And man, does she follow us to a T. And that kid is just like, he comes in beaming like, hi, Dr. Christie. It gives us a hug. Like, he knows everyone in the office. He hugs everyone in the office. His mom says he'll pray for us at dinner. I mean, it's just the sweetest thing. He's in normal kindergarten right now, 5-day, full day.
My gosh.
It's our swim lessons where you're getting thrown into the water to, survive whatever they do there. And Yes. And he's doing so good. So he's one of my like favorite littles right now that was happening. We have lots of them that are like that, but he's just such a bundle of joy. He's like so joyful. He was always so happy to see us. So you're like, man, to now watch him to be able to be confident and connecting with people. His mom like cried telling us how much their kids love coming to the office. They went to dinner the other day and Jackson asked the server for a straw and she's like, it was the first time I didn't have to translate for him. Like he initiated,
Man.
he asked for the straw to the server understood him and brought it to him. And it's like, something small for someone with a child that you're like, wow. But that was like the biggest win for them of him just being able to express himself, communicate. And now being in kindergarten is like so incredible for him. Yeah.
So you can see progress like fairly quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. You will. A lot of the times it starts with the foundation of the nervous system is they're staying in bed and staying asleep. And that's where the body's going to heal. That's where the nervous system
Mm-hmm.
works. So those are things that we look for. And even just small things like, hey, I know they're still going to have meltdowns. Like the stress is still in the system, but look for them to recover faster. Look for them to maintain eye contact longer. Look for them to, like perhaps go one direction and then realize like, mom said something and I am going to redirect a little bit quicker. Because when their brain's moving quick and fast, they literally don't hear you. It's not clicking. They're not trying to be defiant, but they just can't pick up all the information that we do. So yeah, it was pretty quick. He went through what we call a neuro emotional detox where the stress had to leave his body and it looked like any other detox for them where she was like, that was hard, but we got through it and it was worth it. So yeah, it's such a fun story. And I've got a boy, he is 12. And it's just the most incredible. I actually just had a report with his family Thursday where my husband met this guy through a friend. They all went elk hunting together and they brought their son with on this elk hunting trip. And my husband, Jeremy, was like, he was just like stuck to his phone, just trying to do things, but like completely disengaged, wouldn't communicate, like just shut off. And his dad was like, well, we have him medicated for ADHD. And my husband made a comment and said, well, man, if I had my chiropractic table here, I'd lay him down and you'd start getting a whole new kid. That dad apparently went home and told the mom that. And was like, no, this guy said this to me, sort of thing, because they didn't know each other. And they actually started in our office with a small thing in their other kid first. They started with the younger son was having pain in his foot and couldn't finish playing a basketball game and would cry. He's super athletic. And they brought him to us. And we're like, it's not the foot, it's a connection. So like, let's get him, his nervous system worked on. Same, we didn't have to touch the foot. It was the connection piece that was going on with brain and the body. And they're like, whoa, this really works. And a few weeks later, I was having a workshop and they're like, well, we should go to this for our other son that's being medicated and really disengaged and, has all sorts of problems focusing in school. And he was just a train wreck at that point, meltdowns and tantrums. And especially when they get bigger and older, like those don't look great. A lot of families I feel like are like, oh boy, here we go with this like man child throwing the thrash in their body around. Mm-hmm. And they listened to the workshop and they're like, okay, this makes sense. Like this is a brain thing. Brought him in and he has been medication free since June. He went to, he's in 7th or 8th grade, one of the two. He's in middle school. She's like, mom's like, he's doing his homework. He's like, he doesn't even necessarily want to do chores. He'll do them and he's being compliant. He's happier to eat different foods and, all these things. I'm like, well, that just shows me the flexibility in the nervous system. Like kids don't want to be defiant, but if they don't have any flexibility in their nervous system, they're in fight or flight, like that right there, like doing this chore is going to take more from their body to do it. So now they're like, oh, I'd rather cry on the ground. And my husband had said, and I said to the mom, I said, wow, I honestly didn't know that my husband had met yours at this elk camp and said that he's an entirely different child today. And the mom said, yeah. And then she told me the thing that he had said to the husband, like he said, lay this kid on my chiropractic table, we'd have a whole new kid. And she's like, we're like, what the heck? And she's like, and we do. She's like, this is incredible. So, and his dad is so funny. He called it his meth pills. He's like, when's the last time you took your meth pill? And it's like June, so he's going to school without any stimulation to the brain, and it's been awesome. Now, he was not diagnosed on the spectrum, but he was just an example of like a child that was so disconnected and overwhelmed that's now functioning even without the use of meds, that I just love. One of my very, very favorite stories, though, happened years ago now. He was 17. His name was Nathan, and he was on the spectrum. The only language he really had was like a lot of echo. So he just repeat what you said, or he would just know a word he wants to say and say it over and over again. So I'll never forget, I came around the corner for his appointment 7 minutes late for the start time, and he was doing this on his watch. Time, 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 and I was like, oh my gosh, buddy, I'm so sorry. So met with a family, and to know that for 17 years they'd been dealing with Nathan's autism, and just hits their youngest, and really just trying to figure out how to help him function. And she's like, he can't regulate at all. So if we say, which he loves pizza, if I say, Nathan, we're having pizza for dinner, he's running around flapping and hiding, like he can't handle excitement. And it's the same thing if I say, Nathan, they have nieces and nephews at this point because they're older children, we're having kids and married, or nieces and nephews are coming over, and he would do the same thing. But that was fight or flight to him because he couldn't handle the noise. He couldn't handle their crying. He couldn't handle them touching things, like a mess. It just was way too much for his nervous system. And he was another one that was like, I think he might have been like he might have been in 3 days a week for 9 months. But at the end of his care plan, we had videos of him with his nieces and nephews sitting in his lap, reading them a story. And that, right? That was incredible. I was like,
jeez.
So the fact that he could handle them being there, handles touch, handle a child in his lap, connect with them, and read them a story. Because people ask me, like, is it too late for my kid? Depending on, because there's windows that open and close in our nervous system of development. And you're like, you know what, we're not going to know what you're capable of until we get started, until we try. And I share the story of Nathan, where I'm like, he was 17 years old and he was able to make those changes. It's really incredible what the body can do.
That's wild.
It was wild.
So, I mean, there's a lot of things you can do at home to help the nervous system. Those aren't enough, though, correct? Like, you need chiropractic.
It's so hard to break
also.
a pattern. Yeah. If there's disruption between that brain and the body, and those receptors aren't there, until you remove that obstacle, it's just such an uphill battle. And that's what I find with families where they're like, we tried all these things, or we've done all these therapies. And I'm like, they're all the right things. We've got to change the order. We've got to take care of the nervous system first, and then you're going to get more out of, that therapy or that parenting technique you used, or that, that even if it's a medication, that medication or that supplementation that you were trying, you were sending it through this stuck nervous system. And the receptors aren't there. We're not working with a nervous system that can handle or receive that information. Let's remove that subluxation, that foundational stress that's stuck in the body. And a lot of times I always point to upper cervicals. A lot of times it's in the upper cervical spine. Get that removed so that the body can restore itself, so that the brain can get the best signals possible. And then when you're at home doing these things or taking care of the nervous system, because I still believe that's going to be important, you're going to find it way more effective. And yes, you're going to be able to then get your child adjusted and then keep them calm at home by doing other things, rather than forcing a body through a therapy to try to change the reaction in the body. And it's like, you're just trying to override a stress physiology, to be like cognitive behavioral therapy, for example. You're like trying to teach them how to behave, but they're still in stress physiology. You're just trying to override it. Let's get them out of fight or flight and then show them that same behavioral therapy, and things are going to land, rather than, overriding the system that's there to protect.
Wild. Okay. And so those adjustments break up those blocks.
Mm-hmm.
I see. So then what if you get the adjustments, but then you don't work on the home piece. Is it still beneficial?
We've
You
done,
just
you know
kind of,
what? Yeah, it has been.
yeah,
It's interesting because there's some families where you're like, oh wow, there's so much going on at home right now that you kind of wonder, you like pulling that fish out of the dirty pond, cleaning them off and tossing them back into this, like, like
yeah,
how's it going to work with some families? And there's some families that we are shocked at the results, because a lot of the time we get the best results when the families are, they're already have a clean diet. They're already, paying attention to pesticides and screens, and they stop their vaccine schedule. Like this is where we see the best results. But there's some families that are like, they don't always have the resources to clean up the diet either. Sometimes there's families that come in that were gifted chiropractic care. And there was one just recently, because we've had such great success with this one of our patients. He's like, I want to pay for other people because chiropractic care. Like, I want people to have what I have. He's paid for so many care plans already. It's incredible. That's like his love language of like, go see my chiropractor and I'll pay for it, sort of a thing. And so a few of the families he sent in, you're like, they don't have the resources to change this kid's diet. They don't have the resources, maybe even to get off Medicaid and stop the vaccine schedule because they're forced into it. And some of the changes that we've seen in them has just been incredible. So it
man,
does work best if you clean up your environment. Yes.
yeah. Well, I think we've been doing pretty good on the home front. Now we just got to get in and get some adjustments.
Yeah, they heal faster. It's great. They heal faster.
Yeah,
It's clean. Yeah.
it's crazy too. Like throughout this whole journey, it seems like God's put the right people in at the right time, and now we're kind of at a place where we're still doing Hope for Cancer in Mexico, and we're on the second 3 month home program. But I'm always searching for like what's next in this journey, or how
Mhm.
can I be keep bettering it, because we've kind of like, but not like in desperation, like grab at everything. It seems like this is our next step.
Yeah.
Stoked to be talking with you.
Yeah. I'm so glad you had me on.
Yeah. What's the biggest thing you take away from your professional life that you apply to your personal life away from work?
Great question. I think being able to help families, and my biggest thing is I want to be God's hands and feet. And then you almost you allow yourself to do that. You kind of just like break down whatever limiting beliefs or whatever's getting in your way, to know that you're a vessel for God and you want to be his hands and feet, and then allowing yourself to do that in the practice, to be like, I know God put me here. I don't need these thoughts or anything to get in my way, because I know that the body heals. I know that our designer made our body to self-heal, self-regulate, to be healthy, and to heal itself. So if I'm here to remove the obstacle that's there, I'm going to trust the process that this is happening, and then I am God's hands and feet there. And then also allow the good and the bad to kind of shape me. But I like to, of course, I'm like a really positive person, so I like to be like, I need to allow myself to like hear that win and know that I contributed to their life.
Mm,
And I think that reflecting on that, like once again in my journal entries and things that I look at, to be like, how, one of the questions I will play in my brain is like, how can I appreciate even more God's provisions for who I am now? Because a lot of the times we want to be something different, or we want to do something more. We're not happy where we're at. And instead of like chasing down the next thing, it's like, how can I be grateful for where I'm at now? How can I be grateful for these provisions God's put in my life, so that I can be this person, to be his hands and feet, to help this person see, bring heaven to earth, and like allow this child to heal the way that God had designed
right.
them to heal.
That's awesome. That's powerful. What where would somebody start in finding the correct chiropractic office? What should they look for? Like just a simple Google search, like what are, I mean, a bunch are going to pop up.
Oh, yeah, you'll see that. So, your first vetting process, if you want to make it a little bit easier on yourself, you can go to the PX Docs directory. So, it's like pxdocs.com and put in your zip code, and you're going to find doctors that are trained like I am, and you're going to be able to find someone in your area. If that's not an option, because I'll say we started this adventure 10 years ago, there was very few of us, and now I think we're up over 1,000 of us.
Wow.
If that's not an option, you look for nervous system focused chiropractic, you want to make sure somebody has an insight scan. Insight scanning technology is the key to the window of the nervous system. It's like the ultimate thing that you're going to need to know that they're doing that. And you also want to look for that nervous system focused chiropractor should be on their website. Like when you look at their website, you should see what they're doing. So it should be like, I'm taking care of kids, nervous system, neurological development, all of that kind of stuff. You shouldn't see someone like, I'm taking care of the nervous system, and then they're like holding their head and they're like, come in for accident care. It's like neck pain and back pain. You're like, oh, so you're going to get in the office and be like, I don't think this is what you're doing. So just make sure that like their message is congruent, on their website. And you can call and ask questions. Do you do an inside scan? Are you taking care of the nervous system? And there's something called subluxation focus. That's what the chiropractors are really taking care of the nervous system are focused on. They're not focused on muscles and joints and rehab and lasers and balance, and they're not overwhelming a nervous system. They're making sure the foundation is there. Yeah.
That's
So
valuable.
pxdocs.com is your biggest bet. After that, I do believe actually Insight has a directory as well. They just might not have the same training as us.
Okay. I mean, for me, there's got to be somebody in San Diego.
I
Definitely.
think there is. I think there's like 3 in your area because I remember looking
Okay.
for somebody else. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll find them. Well, I want to respect your time. I think we've gone over, but I'm sure I'm gonna have you back on in some months from now. Once you can hear from all our wins on when I find this
Yeah.
office.
That's awesome.
But if you could, what's that?
I was just going to ask, what's your wife's name so we can be praying for her?
Oh, her name's Reka.
What is it?
Reka, Reka.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, she's European. She's Hungarian. But if you could give one piece of advice to parents navigating the world of special needs, what would you give them?
Well, I would tell them don't do it alone. That's for sure. I
Yeah.
know it can be isolating, and that's hard. I think this is like Stephen Covey's work where, they talk about, have you seen like dependence, independence, and interdependence? How he talks about that, where like we start life so dependent on, everybody else. And a lot of times that's where a lot of special needs kids stay. They're going to be very dependent on you for a long time. Then you move to this independence role where like you can be independent. That's where you gain confidence. That's where these kids have a lot of their wins. You're like, oh my gosh, they did this on their own. But the true beauty lies in the interdependence where you can rely on other people and you're not doing it alone with others. And you don't have to, believe everything everybody says and like do everything that they say, but to make sure that you're connecting with someone with your same values and you understanding where they're, maybe where they're coming from or how they can help, make sure you're surrounding yourself with a community, be with others.
Yeah, absolutely. So good. Well, this is the Unspecial podcast. Thank you so much, Dr. Hafer, for being on. I learned a ton. I know our listeners are going to learn a ton, and I'm going to have to go back and listen a couple times because there's so much valuable information and the emphasis on the nervous system. I'm just mind blown on how crucial that piece that is so overlooked.
It is. It is.
Like when you think of health, you're like, all right, I need to work out, I need to eat better, I need to sleep, I need to avoid medication, blah blah blah. But it's like it's all about the nervous system.
Yeah. Connects every other system. You still got to take care of those systems, but if you're not taking care of the nervous system, it's an uphill battle. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, thanks
amazing.
for having
Well, thank
me.
you so much.
You bet.
Yeah.